Welcome to the Process to Ecom Profit podcast, where we know top-line sales just isn't enough to have the business of your dreams. Learn to run a profitable business online that doesn't run you.
Welcome to the Process to E-commerce Profits podcast. I have one of my favorite people in the whole world on today. And he's also one of the first people I call when one of our clients has a logistical emergency. He is my 911, and he is an expert at logistics. He started as a seller, but now he has his own 3PL company that really specializes in Amazon and marketplaces, and they do fantastic work for their clients. So I am super excited to have Eddie from HubDub. That was like really excited even for me.
I was going to say, do you say that with every person, or is it really just me? I'm not sure.
No, I think there's some people you could probably tell that I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of excited to have you on, or, you know.
Okay, all right, I'll give you that one. That's fine.
Yeah, well, I think that I'm so excited because I think this is the missing piece for a lot of people. People think when they think about profitability in Amazon, they think about ads, they think about listing optimization, they think about product cost, but I don't think that people realize that one of the advantages more like established traditional companies have is they understand the power of logistics and how much of a difference it makes for your business being able to be profitable and increase margins, especially right now.
Well, and I think also to that point, if you look at Amazon FBA, which the majority of us are using, and you look at them as being an option as quote unquote a 3PL, you'll quickly realize, well, maybe not quickly, but you'll realize by doing a deep dive and comparing their storage fees and other related warehousing fees as compared to a third party, that it's considerably more expensive. So sellers need to understand that shouldn't be your primary storage point for your products.
And there are some people who maybe they started on Amazon, so they've only used FBA, they've only shipped from their own location. Can you just briefly say what a 3PL is? Because I know people can Google what is a 3PL, but can you talk about like what it is and why it's helpful?
I'll save them to Google, but 3PL, third-party logistics, a solutions provider, service provider who helps any kind of transportation or prep needs of products. So different 3PLs could have different services they offer. For example, we don't do something like returns. So return inventory from Amazon is not our specialty, but there are other options that specialize in that kind of service. Majority of 3PLs will do things like preps products for Amazon, receive cartons from your supplier, store them, make FBA shipments, label, polybag, bubble wrap, the kind of typical prep work that goes along with getting products to Amazon or getting it sold to the customer is typically what a 3PL will do. But there are Amazon-focused 3PLs and there are non-Amazon-focused 3PLs. You can find a 3PL that literally does only storage, for example, and doesn't do any of the prep. So the variety of services is wide, and it really just comes down to what you need and finding the right partner for it.
And, like I've talked to some clients and, I've suggested maybe them using your services and they're like, well, we already have a warehouse, because I think they feel like, it's only for people who are, like maybe they don't have any storage facilities at all. But like, even some really big established companies, their fulfillment centers have very rigid abilities, like, turnaround times, the ability to label things and put things in polybags as Amazon requires, is just too much for their current staffing. So so when do the majority of clients look for your services? Is it people who have existing services or a kind of a mix?
I think it's a mix. I think it's really a question of you got to figure out what's best for your products and your business. I mean, we have brands that we work with, that we represent, that have a 3PL as their main place of handling their goods. For example, it could be anywhere really, it doesn't matter. But they have a main location, and that location, if they needed to, for example, label 10 units for FBA, for example, just a large amount of items, that warehouse might take 3-4 weeks to complete that process. It might be extremely expensive. So we have brands that opt to send products from their other 3PL to us because we can do that faster. We're more established in that kind of service. Another reason you could look for another option for a 3PL is depending on your products. So when people think of third-party logistics and warehousing, they think, I've got to get something in California on the West Coast because it's close to the port. It just makes more logical sense, right? No, not necessarily, because if you're in California, if you're first off, you're importing, you are stuck and bound to whatever's happening in the port of LA, which, as many of you probably understand and have read, it's a mess. There's still on February 2nd, 2022, 100 and some ships outside of the port waiting to get in. So it's a mess. When you use a different 3PL in a different part of the country, you can route things through different ports and have a variety of options. Also, when you have products that are larger than normal, oversized, as Amazon likes to refer to them as, normally those don't go to one facility. They get split up, and they get split up across different parts of the country. So in that aspect, sending product from one central location, as an example, is oftentimes better than shipping from one of the coasts. We have to go across the country for 3 different shipments. So there's a lot of things to think about in terms of selecting a 3PL and in terms of analyzing costs and figuring out what's the best option for your business. But it heavily revolves around what services you need, what kind of time frame you expect and need for your products to be completed, prepped, the whole 9 yards, and also just what kind of pricing that is being offered to you.
If you're always having to ship to Illinois and even here in California, then sometimes it makes sense to have that third-party logistics company someplace else where it's easier to get to your existing warehouses.
Yeah. So whether or not you're shipping from the West Coast to an Amazon facility, you're still directionally still the same process. You're going west to east. And if you look into anything about the logistics pricing model, which I won't bore you with the full details. Basically, going from West Coast to East in the U.S. is extremely expensive versus if you go east to west, which there's not enough traffic going east to west. So that's why it's cheaper. Majority of times, carriers are giving their cost east to west as near their cost because they're just trying to get equipment back to where it's most desired. If you look at, as a simple example, if you look at the cost of a truck to bring it from the West Coast to out east, it could be $7,000-8,000. Where if I was to send that same truck back from me back to California, you're talking 2 or 3. So it's extremely different, just based on the direction of the transport and not so much the total mileage.
And that's all supply and demand because so many people come into the port of LA.
Exactly. I mean, there's everything. So many things going to the port, hence why it's all backed up, and that's why the cost to get out of LA is so expensive, because if you're not going to pay it, someone else is going to. So,
yeah, those trucks aren't leaving empty.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
If you can even find a truck, that's the thing. Sometimes you can't even find one.
Well, and so there's the benefit. So there's a benefit to looking into a 3PL if you don't have the facilities to pack. If you don't have the facilities to do the prep, or maybe you need to, maybe you need to have something shipped out. You're doing some merchant fulfilled or something along those lines that you can't meet those turnaround times for. If you're trying to do so those can be reasons. But then also to kind of make sure that you're able to take advantage of the different types of shipping. Can you go through, because I think most people who come into the Amazon space, especially if they didn't have, if they're Amazon native, they start with small parcel. And small parcel is great, but it's easy to stay in small parcel way past when it's profitable to do so.
Yeah, I mean, small parcel, back when it was basically that, or doing LTL, for example, when it was just the very basis of Amazon shipping. Small parcel was great because it was a quick way to get in product, and you could ship by the box, and in general, there wasn't as many Amazon facilities at the time, and it just was simplistic. But now, small parcel is it's quicker than sending on pallets, is less than truckload, for example. But even so, small parcel is still delivered on full trailer loads by the carrier. In this case, most likely UPS. And we've seen where small parcel can take a number of days to get checked into the facility. And also, what it really boils down to is what the cost looks like from a standpoint of like per pound from a shipment. So what I encourage all sellers to do is when they're sending in any kind of volume, look at the cost for sending pallets versus the cost for sending in all those boxes via small parcel delivery. And you'll see that if you break it down and do the division, that small parcel, it's routinely 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times the cost of pallets. And if you extrapolate this over your total shipments for the month, a year, or however time frame you want to look at, you'll see that the costs add up substantially.
And, I think that sometimes people shy away from LTL and FTL because they are unsure of how the palletizing process works. And it does take a minute to learn, but it's not that bad. And the benefits are really great, but LTL and FTL are not equal. It's not just that one's less than and full truckload. Can you talk about in Amazon land? what what are the considerations between LTL and FTL? Because sometimes it makes sense to do FTL even when you don't have a full truckload.
Do an FTL with your LTL shipment. Okay, this answer is
Yes.
going to be a mouthful. So, okay, I'll try to get that with.
I got my coffee. I'm
Yeah,
ready.
okay. All right. So let's go back to basics here. So LTL versus FTL. LTL stands for less than truckload. FTL, full truckload. Okay. So when you send in an LTL shipment from your location to Amazon and you use, for example, a partnered carrier option, that means you're going to put in your pallets. Say I've got 3. Here's my size, weight. Amazon's going to say, great. Here's your rate. Here's the carrier. Here's the BOL. They'll be there to pick it up, tomorrow or the next day, whatever. That's great, and they might pick it up a day or two after that. However, the problem lies when it gets towards Amazon, because when the freight gets to Amazon, that carrier that was assigned to pick up that load is going to take your shipment and they're going to consider it with the other shipments from other sellers who are bound for the same facility. Okay, so think of it as kind of a funnel. All these shipments get picked up from the top, they all trickle down towards the facility where Amazon's going to receive them. But here's the problem: you got all this freight at the top, a very narrow passage to the bottom. So what happens is a backlog, right? So it's the backlog of freight. And until your freight gets in line to the bottom of that funnel, and I stress, and they have a full trailer to send into Amazon, at that point, that's when they're going to request an appointment from Amazon to deliver that trailer. But the problem with that is that appointment could be 1, 2, 3 weeks out from when they request it. So you take into consideration the time that it took for you to ship the product to the carrier's terminal, for them to then schedule the appointment, then deliver and receive. That's why you see sellers say, oh my God, LTL takes forever, 4, 5, 6 weeks. I can't get in product. That's the reason you see that happening. So LTL is great. It's a great cost savings option if you stagger shipments appropriately and you can afford to have that longer transit time, because you will most undoubtedly have that for most of your shipments with LTL, especially if you're shipping to a larger facility or redistribution facility. If it's standard size goods that get spread out, that kind of thing, you're going to see that a lot. So that's LTL. FTL is a little bit different, because FTL, you have the ability to use a carrier of your choosing, and that carrier, depending on who you're working with, can most likely will schedule an appointment at Amazon before your freight is picked up. Because when you're doing FTL, a dedicated load, that freight's being picked up, and that carrier is going to want to deliver it as soon as possible. So they're going to go ahead and schedule the appointment first, pick up the freight, then deliver it, because they don't need to hold that freight at their terminal, nor do they even have a terminal to hold it at after it's picked up. So scheduling the appointment first with your carrier, whoever's working, on that with you, is going to be more beneficial from a transit time perspective, because it's going to cut down on that receiving time. More importantly, when it gets checked into Amazon with a dedicated carrier, that trailer that it was delivered on, it's not being like dropped off in their yard, and that carrier is not waiting for Amazon to empty the trailer and then coming back to retrieve it. If it's being delivered on a dedicated truck, that driver is staying with that trailer when he goes to deliver, and Amazon is basically what they call live unloading, taking the goods off the trailer at the time of delivery, and then that truck goes on its way. So the receiving process, the check-in process on the Seller Central side is much faster. So that's the two differences between that. However, there's a third option here, which is when it's going to require the work of a 3PL. And this is what a lot of sellers don't understand, is that most 3PLs have a lot of clients who are sending products to the same places. So in theory, if you're using a 3PL and you've got 1, 2, 3 pallets to send in at a time, they can most likely, if they're familiar with the process, consolidate those pallets onto one of their dedicated trucks, one of their FTL trucks, which is composed of multiple seller shipments, and everyone gets the benefit of being able to not only reduce their costs, but get checked in a lot faster. So that's the option that I like to press on my clients. That's what I suggest everyone look into, because it significantly reduces your cost and your transit time, and it allows you to make sure you're staying in stock and make sure you have a healthy balance on your profitability side as well.
Now, there might be somebody saying, well, that all sounds great and I wish I could do it, but I don't sell enough volume to send in a full truckload. So I don't even really need to listen to that whole thing.
Well, okay, so if you don't have enough volume, then again, I defer you to option 3 that I mentioned. But even so, let's say you only have 8, 10 pallets, something like that, right? You have to consider the profitability standpoint from 3PL and logistics, and the cost of 3PL and logistics is not just in the transportation costs themselves, because let's say an LTL shipment would have cost me 500 and a truckload would cost me 2,000. So it's a $1,500 difference. But what is the cost potentially of you being out of stock for 3 weeks of products, right? So you could make 7,000 in profit over the 2 weeks that you were out of stock for not having goods in the facility. There's your answer. You're better off most likely sending in the more expensive option just to make sure you have stock at the facility and can maintain your sales, because we all know out of stock is one of the worst things that can happen on Amazon. And if you are not taking into account all those considerations, suddenly you can be blindsided by the fact that a cost that potentially was more expensive than another actually was a better option for your business overall in the long term.
It's not just the opportunity cost of the sales too. It's also if you've been working on a ranking campaign for your ads, if you are out of stock when an influencer picks up, because you never know when you're going to be featured in a blog, or and with the storage limits and the restock limits, once you process that shipment, it's holding up that space. So you're not able to send in, before, you could send in a bunch of little shipments and they would all kind of catch up. But now that you have this restriction of these restock limits, that's not as viable for every company, depending on what you're, especially if you're ramping up for a seasonal item where you have to have a quick ramp up.
And that's especially true for less than truckload shipments, because, you're talking about weeks at a time. What are you going to do? And weeks at a time, I mean, I know we're past Q4 now, being February 2022, but Q4 happens every year. And if you're talking about a shipment that could take even 3 weeks, let alone 6, 7 weeks that other sellers have reported, you're potentially blowing your entire season. And different sellers, different products have different seasonal highs. Obviously, if you're in lawn and garden, you're probably going into quote unquote your Q4 in the near future. If you're a summer seller, if you're selling, outdoor pools, any kind of barbecue equipment, something like that, I mean, summer is your high. If you're in toys, Q4 is your high. So it very much depends on the products you're selling. But, it's not just the holidays as we know them.
And, I think that when you're thinking about small parcel, it's, we're first getting started. We're kind of testing out products. We're trying to see what's going to sell. LTL would be for people that have very steady sell-through rates. They can have very long windows to restock. FTLs are things that you're doing fast launches, ramping up for seasons, or quick restocks because you're constrained by some other thing, or you're doing enough volume that it's great to do just because of the discount that you're going to get on the actual shipment.
And it also depends on the how you're shipping. Are you shipping yourself or are you shipping with 3PL? Because if you're shipping yourself and let's say you restock twice a month, every other week, or if some people I know stock once a month and they just stock for 2 months at a time, whatever the case may be. I mean, there's inventory limits to consider, but if you're not stocking as frequently, then obviously LTL is probably more of a problem because you don't have those frequent shipments. But if you're one that's restocking all the time, then LTL probably could be advantageous because at any one time you have multiple shipments in transit and any one of them can be checked in. But that again, if you have a 3PL who can consolidate for you, then even better because now you're getting best of both worlds. So there's a lot of options to consider, but it's very much something that each business has to consider based on their needs and their products. It's not a one size fits all by any means.
With clients, do you help them kind of plan out because I know there's so much interruption in the supply chain right now. Do you kind of help them to say, okay, this is what your stock is. This is how quickly you should make some of these adjustments. Is that something that you do with clients?
We do. So we monitor, one of the services we offer is stock monitoring, basically a daily report showing you what your sales have been, what your inventory looks like, forecasting projections of what you might need at Amazon. We're not only looking at it on a trailing 30-day sales cycle because 30 days is great, but if you have highs and peaks and valleys in that time frame, then you won't really know the true picture. So we're looking at the trailing day, the trailing week, the trailing month. We're looking at all these factors and basically creating a formula to figure out which is the best option, and then suggesting and then molding our recommendations for shipments and inventory restocking based on those numbers. But it's an ever evolving process and report that needs to be looked at constantly to make sure that things are going as planned.
And have there been any recent changes on Amazon that you think that people really need to be adjusting their plans for outside of the supply chain changes?
Well, I mean, most recently, a lot of sellers have reported that a lot of sellers that we work with, we have seen that inventory limits have actually gone up considerably, which is honestly not all that surprising, being that we're in Q1. It's not Amazon peak season, if you will, but I take that with a grain of salt because we're now into the third year when, or I guess last year, because it was a third year when people had inventory issues and inventory limit restrictions. And I think the thought that these higher limits are here to stay and Amazon has adjusted their fulfillment center capacity to meet the evolving needs of e-commerce 100% is just a foolish remark, because e-commerce is growing faster than even Amazon can grow. That's the fact. So I think as we go into throughout later in the year, you should expect some of the same problems and some of the same issues that we had over the last number of years. We don't know what's going to happen with the world in general. We don't know what other issues logistically we're going to face, if the port options are going to be still stressed out, if the trucking issue is going to get worse. So I guess I'm cautiously optimistic at what I'm seeing and being told, but at the same time, I very much on the logistics side believe planning for the worst, hoping for the best.
I completely agree. People were like, oh, the IPI will never get raised again. Whatever the IPI is, we're trying to get clients 50 points above it because that's usually the increment that they move it. And sometimes they give you 2 weeks notice. So it's not like you have all of this time. And Cyndi and I in another episode really talked about how before coronavirus started to hit, and as we started to see it roll through, the businesses that have survived and done well are the businesses that weren't on the razor margins. And I think that's for logistics too. It's unpredictable. We don't know if there's going to be another monster variant. We don't know if there's going to be lockdowns. We don't know if ports are going to get shut down again. And we don't know how consumer behavior is going to change until we get there. So I feel like it's about being proactive and giving yourself lots of ability to be flexible is going to be really important the next couple of years.
Consumer behavior, I think, is very important because I think that even outside of COVID, you're going to see lasting impacts just in terms of how shoppers have been trained to utilize the marketplace to buy products that they may have just bought in stores on any other given year. And I think one of the tests to that is if you look at retail store hours. Nowadays, you see major retailers, for example, they open the doors at 11 a.m., they close by 6 or 7 at night. I mean, 5 years ago, if I had told you that Best Buy, for example, was going to run an 11 to 7 shift, you'd probably look at me and say, that's insane. Like, I need to go after work or after dinner and I'll be able to pick up whatever I need. But now it's just try it. I mean, it's not possible. I remember way back when in my RA days, 8 a.m., store would be open. Especially in holiday time, they'd be open to 11, 12 sometimes, and for sure at least 9 or 10. But I can't tell you the number of times that I thought about, I need to pick up something quick, and I just can't because they're closed. And I think that outside of COVID, I don't know you're going to see that dramatically change, especially with the current workforce conditions, which are a whole another topic we can talk about. I just don't think you're going to see, even with all the restrictions potentially lifted and the spread of the virus not an issue anymore, even with that being the case, I don't think you are going to see retail as it once was. And what sellers need to realize is that has ever evolving and lasting impacts for e-commerce that you need to adjust to.
And I know a lot of people were talking about how, last year was pretty flat. People didn't see the same aggressive growth in 2020 because the 2020 growth was artificial.
Well,
it wasn't.
We had no idea.
Yeah.
No one knew what to expect in 2020 versus 2019.
Yeah.
I felt like 2020, when it hit in Q1, was basically I feel like Q4 never ended in 2020. It was like Q4 times 5. It was like 5 consecutive quarters of Q4. No one really knew how to handle it. It was just a stressful year.
It was an exhausting year for many reasons.
Yes.
Well, and as you know, if people go for 2 or 3 years with labor shortages and they're not used to being able to go to Best Buy at 9 or 10, even when Best Buy is able to do that again, the consumer behavior will have changed where people will say, they'll start to immediately think, well, after 7, it's just better for me to order off of Instacart, or it's better for me to order off Amazon. I can get it the next day. Because as we've had this shrinking of labor force and shrinking of hours that are available, last mile delivery has gotten a lot better. And the way that you can get something online from a lot of different places, not even just Amazon, is changing consumer behavior. I think there'll be people who go back, but I think that you've had a demographic that has shifted permanently.
With Amazon's development and evolvement of Amazon Logistics, which is their it's many arms of the business, but it's their last mile service for most of the country, where their own trucks, their own independent contractors would deliver boxes. That has revolutionized the way people can buy and receive goods online. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've ordered something on Amazon at Saturday night and it's there by Sunday. UPS and the FedEx and the post office are just not going to compete with that. They never have been able to, and they never will. Amazon realized that years ago. That's why they built this arm. It's cheaper for them. It's better for the customer. It fits their flywheel perfectly. But I mean, if you look at your packages you get from Amazon now, when's the last time you got a box from Amazon that was ripped up or damaged or dented? Right? I mean, most of you are going to say never. And chances are that box is pristine because it probably came from a last mile store facility that it was packed in local to your location. It probably was in that box for max 8 hours. It literally went from one pickup vehicle to your delivery vehicle. There's no potential for it to get damaged. I mean, I've been inside the FCs. I've been inside several Amazon last mile delivery hubs. I've played the role of a last mile delivery driver at one point because I wanted to see what that was like. That was a very unique, interesting experience. I definitely got the behind the scenes with that one. Did not get paid well, but that's okay. It was an experience. It's pretty incredible.
And there's so much more, and Amazon is going to continue to grow. And I think what you're doing is making it more accessible for companies to really kind of utilize the fullness of the logistics that Amazon is providing. Do you do other marketplaces too, or is it primarily Amazon?
We primarily is Amazon because that's the majority of our customers are, they know Amazon is the elephant in the room in terms of selling product online. But then again, we can support other marketplaces that our customers need. I mean, some of our customers sell through Walmart. Some of our customers sell through major retailers. Some of our customers do B2B orders. So it depends on the client's need. I mean, we're happy to work with anyone and figure out if it's a viable solution for both of us.
So if somebody's, maybe things have been growing for them on Amazon, they're starting to outgrow their facilities, or they're feeling, every time they talk to their warehouse manager, they're upset because of the new frustrations with Amazon, or because Amazon's a whole different place. When should a company start thinking about interviewing 3PLs?
I would say when you get to a point where your repetitive tasks are taking, a considerable amount of time to complete, they're becoming error prone. The staff you have in place is not familiar with the Amazon process, not familiar with the bill of shipment methodology, not familiar with cost analysis and figuring out which shipment is the best for your specific need. All of those factors can be red flags in terms of looking at an option to better suit your business. But I tell people when you're looking at a 3PL, the biggest question you've got to ask if you're an Amazon seller specifically is, what is your Amazon experience? What is your Amazon background? Because I can find you probably in any area of the country dozens of 3PLs. I promise you, out of a dozen 3PLs that I might find, probably 2 of them would fit the bill if you ask the right questions. And it's important to have that conversation up front so that you don't go send in product to them, have high expectations, and they fall extremely short.
That people should be asking that you think that maybe they might not be asking when they're interviewing 3PLs.
What kind of services do you offer? How do you transport goods to Amazon? What's your staffing like? What are your hours? Do you receive frequently? Are appointments required? What kind of products do you store? well, how do you bill? Do you charge for a full month, based on the calendar month? Do you prorate for shorter periods? Do you have minimums in place? Do you, I think I mentioned before, what's your staffing like? What's your typical turnaround time? Do you have certain guarantees? There's a lot of questions. I mean, that we could probably brainstorm a list of dozens, but you basically, I treat it as, you are interviewing them for a job, which you really are. They're a service provider for you, for your business. Without them, or if they have a lot of missteps, it's going to severely impact the ability for you to be successful, profitable, insert whatever business term you want to use there. But you have to really interview them, and you have to make sure that they're able to not only give you answers, but give you clear, concise answers that are valid and not just trying to, wing it.
To make sure you talk to them about service levels. When they get busy, how do they prioritize who goes out? Do they have insurance? What happens if the warehouse burns down? What happens if they close?
All those are important questions. How they prioritize is very critical. Some warehouses will prioritize their shipments by their client size, which if you're a smaller seller is awful news for you, because you're probably going to be continuously at the back of the line. Our warehouse, we're very much believe in first in, first out. So you send a request, it's prioritized by that order. Obviously, urgent request will fit them in as needed, but it's not going to impact the service of other clients who are in line. That being said, I mean, insurance is another thing to think about. Most 3PLs, I would say probably 95% plus, do not have your goods insured. That goes for us too. The cost of having a policy to insure the full value of all of seller's goods to a 3PL would put them out of business. Just because there's so many products, so many different commodities, so many different values. I mean, an insurance company probably would have a hard time underwriting that to begin with. So you need to have on your own insurance policy, if you have one, or if you don't get one, a policy that covers your goods stored at a third-party logistics location. Not only if they have a catastrophe at the facility, but what if they lose goods? What if it's stolen? What if it's, who knows? There's a lot of what ifs. And make sure that your 3PL contract clearly outlines who's responsible for what case.
If products are going international, coming in from outside of the country, do you recommend that they make a stop before they hit you, or that they come straight to you?
You mean from, like, if they're sending from China?
Yeah.
Most of the times, if you're sending from China, the best way to send is to quote it direct all the way to the end destination. Now, does it mean that it's going to go nonstop directly to whatever city the 3PL is closest to? No, not necessarily. I mean, it might go through one port, change methods of transport, and then go to the rest of the way on a different method. But the overall quote and the overall cost to move the freight is normally quoted as start to finish, and it's usually more cost effective to do it that way versus quoting it to a port and then having a separate part of the shipment pick up from the port and then go to the next location. It's usually better to loop it into one.
So a lot of times I'll have clients that say, wouldn't it be better for me to send the items directly from China to the Amazon warehouses? And in theory, that does sound like, yes, it would be more efficient. I have my reasons that I tell them why that's a horrible idea. But do you want to, because I know that you have a lot of experience, that I would love to hear your more seasoned experience in that area.
I mean, the biggest way to look at this is that Amazon's a wild card. You don't know what the limits, rules, processes are going to be in the future. And all of a sudden, if you're sending in thousands of products, they might have a high velocity, but what happens when their limits all of a sudden change, their rules change, their receiving process changes? Your product slows down, there's more competition, all of a sudden you're overstocked. And then, by the way, the cost to remove products has doubled. There's a host of problems. I mean, back to when we were talking about before, how with full truckloads, you can get, a dedicated appointment and you can get in really much quicker. That's for palletized goods. If you're thinking about sending in a container to Amazon and you're going to have it received in Amazon directly, sure, you could do that. But little known fact is that the appointments at Amazon, especially in Q4, for receiving a floor loaded without pallets is what that's called, container of just boxes, few and far between. It can take over a week to schedule that appointment at Amazon. And if your container is delayed at the port, the ship's backed up in the port, and you missed your appointment time, guess what? You're in the back of the line. So there's a lot of reasons why I highly advise against that. I think that having a 3PL or having even if you have your own warehouse set up, having something in place where you can control the speed of your products and you can control the ultimate dispatch and have that flexibility is really going to be key.
And one of the issues that we see further down the line as an agency is when we're checking their voice of the customer, sometimes there's a slip in the quality of the product. And if you don't have so I know that one of the things that you can do is you can inspect the items as they come in, or, you can have somebody check to make sure that, or send one to them, to your client. If you're waiting for customers to tell you that this batch of jojoba oil smells like urine, then you've already lost customers. You already have negative reviews that are going to and that's going to hurt your ad costs and your conversion rate for a long time to come. So those shortcuts can be kind of a long thing. We've also seen where the warehouse in China, they package it with the wrong packaging and it's the wrong ASIN is assigned, and then it causes a giant mess. So, having that extra US side set of eyes can help. Plus, just with the restock restrictions, it just doesn't work anymore.
And definitely have your suppliers use batch numbers for your product. You want to be able to track, and by batch numbers, what we mean by that is every production run that you do, the carton should have a number that's assigned to that production run. They call it a batch number. So that if there's a customer reporting a product, one of the first questions you want to ask is for a picture of the bottom of the box or a confirmation of the batch number. You want to try to create patterns, because if you all of a sudden have a product that, simple say, right? I want to sell this stapler. I'm a staple manufacturer. I'm not really, but just we're going to use this. But I'm making these, and all of a sudden my customers are complaining, saying, hey, the spring doesn't work. I don't know what's wrong with this product. Well, your entire product line might not be bad. Maybe it's just one bad batch. All of a sudden, if you're asking your customers, hey, what's the batch number? And all of them give you the same number, chances are that batch is the problem. But having that number is going to be key in helping to identify what the root cause is or where it is.
And I think all of those things are things that having somebody that's seasoned in logistics on your team is really, really helpful for. I just looked at the time and I've already kind of gone over the amount of time I asked for you. So I want to be respectful because I know you're always really busy. If people want to get a hold of you or they want to contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I will share a link with you, which you can post on this video. And there's a informational section there with the ability to submit a form for them directly that'll come to us, and then one of our team members will reach out.
I want to thank you again for coming on. I always love talking to you for many reasons, but especially when it comes to logistics. Like you will mention something on the side that I'm like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. And so I feel like I'm smarter every time that I talk to you on the business side. And so that's it for today's show. Cyndi's going to come on now with the 5-minute fix.
Thanks, Robyn.
All right.
This is Cyndi Thomason with your 5-minute fix. Many of our clients really struggle with keeping their operating expenses under control, and it's an easy trap to get into because we sign up for things as a trial. Subscriptions are notorious for this, and then we use them for a little while. Then we decide that they're really not what we are going to use long term, but we never think about going back and cutting them off. So that's an easy place to go in and audit your expenses to understand how you can cut things that aren't going to really have an impact on your business. So this is what we recommend. Every quarter, do an exercise we call Cut, Reduce, Keep. You can go into your QuickBooks file or your Xero file and look at the transactions. You can pull your profit and loss report by the detail level. Pull it for a month or for 3 months, and then tell it you want to group it by vendor name. So that'll put all of your subscriptions to your bookkeeping service, all of the subscriptions to your Google Suites or Office 365. It'll group all of those things together so you can go down and look. And first of all, you just get an idea of the impact of those expenses. But secondly, you'll get an opportunity to see the things that you're being charged for and the expenses, how they're adding up for things that you don't use. We recommend take a pencil and mark out anything that you can eliminate, and then put it on your calendar to go in that next week and cancel that subscription. then anything that you could use less of, maybe you highlight that and you go back to that service or that software and say, hey, what can I do to reduce the level of service here because I'm not using 90% of what I'm paying for. Go through this exercise every quarter. And if you do, you'll stay on top of your operating expenses and nothing will get totally out of hand. You won't be looking at your year-end information and wondering, where did all my money go? So put it on your calendar. At the end of the quarter, do a cut, reduce, keep exercise. And I'd love to hear how much were you able to save by doing this on your business every quarter.
Thank you for listening to the Process to Ecom Profits podcast. Make sure you subscribe to get updates for new episodes. Leave a review, and one lucky winner each month will win a 1-hour call with your choice of our hosts, a value of over $300. Keep listening to hear the winner announced on the first show of the month. You can contact our hosts by using the Contact Us form at processtoecomprofits.com. You can also find the contact information of our hosts and show guests in the show notes for each episode.